the No Worry at Work podcast, hosted by the Boyd Law Group. We're labor and employment law attorneys, and we host extraordinary people talking about their lives and how they have found joy, meaning, and removed the worry from their work.
I'm Federico Foli, owner of Expansion Advisory, and I'm Chief Strategy Officer of Axians North America for the Vinci Energy Group.
Thank you so much for coming here today, Federico.
Thank you so much for having me, Patrick.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us from wherever you might be and listening to this podcast. My name is Patrick Boyd, and I'm from the Boyd Law Group, which is a labor and employment law firm. And this podcast is really designed to explore the workplace and the work experience for people. The average American is working 90,000 hours in their lives. That amounts to about 10 or 15 years behind a desk, behind a computer, or in a corporate building. The average American, according to the National Academy, is working between 40 and 50 years of their lives. That is time spent focusing on their jobs. And I think we all know that the average American and perhaps the average worker isn't getting as much satisfaction from their jobs as we might hope. The goal with the podcast here is for us as a law firm to be able to share some of the extraordinary people we've had a chance to work with in their jobs. Those people who have had a chance to be successful, and not just successful in terms of climbing the corporate ladder, but also successful in terms of finding their work rewarding and finding their work contributing a meaning. Federico is a CEO, or has been a CEO, and has consulted with CEOs, and has a tremendous amount of joy that he brings to his life and joy that he brings to the people he works with. He's currently working as a chief strategy officer to help other companies incorporate that joy of work into those jobs. And I'd just like to thank you very much, Federico, for coming to join us here today.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you for your kind words.
It's really
happy to be here.
It's really a pleasure to have you. The first thing I want to talk about, Federico, just so we can talk a little bit about you, is to get a sense of your background and where you've come from. I think a lot of people who hear C-suite executives imagine somebody coming out of the womb and starting to look at profit and loss sheets, or having a beautiful vision of accounting. And that's not everybody's journey. Certainly it wasn't your journey. So if you could talk to us a little bit about your long-term background, how you became a person, if you will.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Patrick. And as you can tell by my accent, I was born and raised in Italy, and moved to the U.S. Several years ago. I started to work with the U.S. in the U.S. about 25 years ago. As you said, I didn't start as an executive, certainly not as a guy immediately involved with P&L and business fundamentals. My studies are in political science, and that allowed me to get on an international program where I was able to explore more about cultures in different parts of the world, and was extremely important. And to these days, this is probably one important asset that I gain over time, because understanding cultures is, it's very important in business. Not only in business, but especially in business.
And you speak several languages, if I understand correctly.
Yeah,
right?
I speak 5 languages. So of course,
so that's Italian, French, English,
Spanish, and believe me or not, I also study Arabic, so I can still speak and write, classical Arabic. So.
And I remember when we first met in person, you came up to the office, and I had my old PRS leaning against a speaker, and you have been involved with music for an important part of your life as well. Is that right?
Yeah. I got so excited that day when I walked into your office. You certainly don't expect that from a lawyer.
Right.
It's like, it was not just the guitar, but also the amplifier. So that's
right.
I was fascinated. Yeah, music has always been part of an important part and component of my life. And in my life, since I was a little kid, I always had passion for music, and I always played music, different instruments. I used to sing. And then at some point, I had to decide if I wanted to really pursue a music career or go to college and learn, a different job. Starting from when I was 18, 19 years old, I really started to focus more on bass.
Okay.
I got passionate about jazz, at that time acid jazz, and all this new stream of music that started from the UK, and bass, of course, is a very strong component of jazz funk.
Sure.
And so I got really passionate about it. And really, my dad, that was the practical guy in the family, said you should actually go learn.
What did he do?
My dad was involved with maritime business.
Okay.
So I'm originally from a town called Ravenna on the Adriatic coast of Italy. And so my dad was working for a company that was specialized in unloading boats at the docks. So it was a practical guy, hard worker, and he said, wait a minute, what is the likelihood that you can make a living out of music? So he said, go to college, educate yourself, and find a job. And then if you want to play music.
Tension on that, or were you okay with that, or was it something in between?
You know, there was a little tension, but then I think I realized that you know, it is not easy to be a musician. I had already many musician friends at that time, and luckily also my teacher was a very important bass player in Italy and playing with all the top singers and musicians, and he was already, you know, it was a challenge also for him because you always have to make sure you have a gig and the next gig. So I decided to go to college and pick a university that would allow me to, again, you know, study about not just politics, but, you know, the international environment with all these aspects, including languages, you know, the legal aspects of it, and travel the world and learn, you know, about different disciplines that would allow me to find a job where I could have applied, you know, all the things that I've learned and be more effective.
One of the things that you've shared with me that I thought was so meaningful and useful was the way that you don't see music as separate and distinct from leadership in business, but rather the two have much in common.
Yeah, I do think that pretty much actually every single aspect of music has a connection with business. And if I have to explain it in a practical way, in music you have, you know, you have harmony, you have the music fundamentals, you have rhythm, you have, you know, collaboration, improvisation, changes, and it's pretty much the same thing in business. So I basically always use music as a tool, or, you know, the values of music and the fundamentals of music as tools to improve whatever I did and I'm still doing in business. Yeah. And again, you know, you can't make a good song, or you can't actually create a good music experience if you're unable to pull them all together. And there's no good music without collaboration. There is no music without, again, humility, you know, knowing that good music can only happen if you really interact with open heart and open mind with the rest of, you know, let's call it a team, like in business, no? It's a team. It's a team of people that, you know, they really have to connect, understand each other, look to each other in real time, and make it happen.
And did that mean you stopped music, or did you continue to play and study at the same time?
So I stopped playing music when I was 25, 26. Reason being, you know, when I was 27, myself and my wife, we got our first kid. And with my first daughter, the first 10 years, it was like, you know, a lot of travel for work, and the first kid in the family. And then after 4 years, we had our second kid, and then one more. So I was so busy with family and work that for about 10 years I had to stop, and I didn't really have the energy for it. And then it was really about, you know, 10 years ago when my dad unfortunately passed away, and you know, we talked a lot about life, and he said, how about music, Federico? You still have that as a project.
And he turned you back
yeah.
into looking at that.
Yes, he said, you know, try not to find a way not to leave actually your dreams behind, because he realized that unfortunately he had a cancer and he passed in 5 months, and so he didn't have much time to really, how can I say, really, you know, much time to do the things that we wanted to do together. And he said, and so, you know, he actually, he started a music conversation again, and he said, if that is a dream, you know, go back to it, and really, you still have time. Yeah. Don't leave it behind. And this is how I restarted, you know, really my music studies, and I'm lucky enough now here in New York and New Jersey to get to play with great musicians, and also continue to learn from great teachers, and that's a journey, no? It's music is a journey.
Of course. One of the things that we've also talked about, and I find this to be a common narrative with successful people in life and in business, is some of the challenges you faced. I think it's very easy for people to see a successful C-suite executive and say, wow, they must have had everything go right. Must have been all green lights, right? But of course that's not true for you, nor is it true for anybody. So could you maybe give us a couple of examples, or an example of a challenge or a struggle you had, and walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that change doesn't really, and challenges don't happen just and only to executives. I think it's the same thing for all of us, and it's a constant in life. And for me, probably one of the most challenging situations in my life and career was about 5-6 years ago, where and when basically I decided to leave a company where I had a pretty good, position. I was making. Good salary, and I was kind of like in a stable situation, but the culture of the company was not for me. So I decided to change, and unfortunately, with that change, also a legal dispute happened, where you helped me and support me actually go through it, and I guess that at first was really tough. And but then over the years, that moment of change and challenge allowed me to actually get to a better situation, really evolve into really a better place. I think that that allowed me now these days. I'm working with a large corporation as well as an advisor for different businesses. I was able to carve out time to write a book, playing music. So I get from that challenge that once again was one of the most challenging situations of my life, really tough moment. I was able to create something better for me. That led to a better and more balanced lifestyle, I guess.
And there's a tendency, or was a temptation at that point, just to replace one big company option with perhaps another big company option, right? And walk me through that. I mean, I think sometimes there's this temptation to have a place, and because it's stable, it's the place you want to stay.
Right.
I think perhaps the best of people perhaps decide to look for those other options. A difference as opposed to the same.
I think that is human nature, no, Patrick. I think that as humans, we always try, not always, but most times we try to find the easy way out of a problem. So it's easier, to say I'm going to find a new job, and they just offer me a new position. There is a good salary attached to it, and I discovered that it was not just about joining a new company and get a new nice salary out of it, but it was more important for me to wait and be patient and go through the pain to create a better situation. For me today, it's like being able to work still with a large company, but also have the space and the time to also do other things. And that was probably the toughest moment, one of the toughest moments in my career, because again, you leave a company where you are successful, you have a salary, a stable economic condition, a situation, and you have to reinvent yourself, figure out, what to do next. And that was a challenge initially, but eventually it has evolved in something I like to think that is something better. Meaning these days I'm doing, I'm still working with a large corporation, but I also get to work as an advisor for different companies, different industries. I got to write a book, play music, and I guess that was tough in the beginning, but it translated into eventually a better and more balanced lifestyle, I think. It's not a dream. I still have challenges like all of us, but, it was a tough moment that, I believe we managed well also from a legal standpoint, and it allowed me to grow out of it.
I think it turned out nicely, and it was a pleasure working with you. Now, one of the things I didn't mention when we started was the fact that you wrote a book, right? And we have it here. It's called The Mindful Leader, The Sound of Business. And I guess I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. That is, as a chief strategy officer and as somebody working on yourself, but also working on the development of others that report to you or that you're looking at as an organization. What are some of those key ingredients to success as a leader for people?
Yeah, the most important values, especially these days where we live in a world and where change and transformation happen fast. It's, as leaders or as people responsible of something inside a business, a department, a small team, whatever. We have to learn how to really connect with people, from a human standpoint. It's I always like to talk with my team and the people that I know in business about an important thing, which is when we work for a company, we have a title. And the job title for me, it's something that goes vertical. I always say to my team that, again, the job title is important because it defines a legal responsibility, and it's important, in the reporting structure. But other than that, what is more important is that they understand that, again, I'm playing on a daily basis at their level, horizontally. I'm there to support them, to listen to them, understand, what are the problems, the issues, and then work all together to, like in music, to make good music. That was I call it the sound of business, because I think that if we act with empathy, we really understand and connect with our people, we work together, we can perform better, and we can make the business sound better. So that's, and I truly believe this. It's not just a statement. It's been my way of working for the past 25 plus years.
And if there were something that you would say that you think most people are missing along those lines, that is something that they've gotten wrong, the biggest mistake you see in that leadership style or in those positions that people are taking these days, what would you say that was? If there is one, by the way.
I think there is one. For me, it's called a top-down approach. I think that, historically and also these days, you have leaders that still believe that they can dictate from the top what people must do. Yep. They don't care about other people's opinion. And the expectation is just they execute whatever they tell them to execute and do, even if it's wrong.
Right. And
so a few leaders don't even think that they're wrong. They can be wrong. They think that they know it. If you have, or when you have a structure like that, an organization like that, top down, you have an organization that is extremely rigid. And when change happens and occurs, because there is a disconnect between the leadership and the people below the leadership, it's almost impossible to react to that change and to really understand with focus what are the best steps and action to be taken. Because once again, what the top-down leadership style creates is fear.
Yeah.
People are fearful.
They're more afraid of making a mistake than they are of getting it right.
Yeah. And I think that the most important values to any change-ready organizations these days is the ability of the leaders and the leadership to communicate constantly in a transparent way with their people. Even when things go wrong, go south, or, it's very important for them to communicate, let them know what's going on, and tell them with open heart that you need their help. Because in this way, people are not fearful. They know that they're allowed to express themselves, to be creative, to find solutions. They feel happier, and they work together. And I think these days, especially with the pandemic, and I don't know if you can say after the pandemic, but we should be hopefully out of it. But the thing is that I think that is even more important that we understand these values, because, as I said, things around us are extremely challenging, and change happens so fast that unless you're connected with people on a daily basis, truly connected, there is trust, there is collaboration, strong collaboration, it's almost impossible to perform and to really achieve whatever results is in your plan.
Yeah.
In the other scenario where you tell them, don't think about it, just do what I'm asking you to do, and by the way, you stick with the plan, and then again you paralyze the organization, and you see, I was just recently talking in an interview about one of the few industries that because of this way of thinking and acting of the leaders, they are in trouble. They've been in trouble for a few years. Is retail. Think about it. So many retailers actually refuse the new way that customers and consumers go about buying a product. They relate to a brand. They refuse, to use technology to provide a better and more engaging customer experience, and they went bankrupt in a few years.
Yeah.
I use the example of companies like it's public, so we can talk about it, like Sears versus Target.
Right.
Sears is probably one of the most historical and iconic brands in the U.S. and North America, and it's been for centuries. And now again they went south in less than 10 years, know. And while Target, that was in trouble in 2015, they decided to shut down all the stores in Canada. It was a bold move because then they refocused in the U.S. They rebranded they completely rethought their business model, rebranded it, and now it's one of the most successful brands just in a few years after. But why? Because the leadership was open to understand what is that they were doing wrong and what was truly happening in the market, what the customer expectation was and is, and they were open. They're still open to change their business model to satisfy their need, their expectation.
So that being nimble
is
an important part of the business. I'd like to kind of pivot on this a little bit because we were talking about this, and I think it's an interesting concept. Mm-hmm. Meditation and the process of introspection mm-hmm. and quiet that's part of meditation is an important part of the way you think about life and work. Right. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, or me a little bit about that?
Yeah, for me, I started my experience with meditation when I was 19 years old. So.
And you do it how often?
Once a day.
For how long?
So when I wake up in the morning, half an hour every morning. So I wake up early and I do that. And
so let me just ask about the swag a little bit. Is it? Do you have a mat? Do you have a block? Do you have a? How do you do it?
No, I have my little corner. Right next to my bed. So I literally wake up and refresh and make sure that I'm fully awake, and then sit down and do my meditation for about 30 minutes.
Okay.
I always, when I talk about meditation, my recommendation to beginners as well as people who've been doing meditation for many years and they're struggling is that it's better to focus on quality and on quantity. A lot of people, because it's hard, to be able to sit down, focus in silence or not, and really focus your mind for a little bit. Right. And so sometimes it's better to do it, 10 minutes. For me, it's half an hour. Other people is more, other people is less. But again, for me, those 30 minutes, it's what serves the purpose and what works. Yeah. And I do it every morning. So that's.
And do you come to it with a mantra or with a problem or with a challenge, or are you just looking to reset your thought processes and then to revisit the challenge or whatever of the day at that time?
Well, as a Buddhist, I do have my mantras also, and I would say the main mantra that I recite every day, it's focused on helping other people. So
what is that?
Well, it's a long mantra, so I'm not going to recite it all right now, but basically the focus is really on the fact that we are here as human beings to help each other, and you kind of like, with that mantra is a way to remind yourself that every day the most important thing you can do in life is help other people, starting with your family, but then you go to work, the people that you meet on the street, whatever. You always try to focus on that. Yep. So that's really the main thing. And then so there is that mantra, and then there is also then a little bit of concentration exercise, which is about being able to focus, going back to your breath, focus your mind, and so I do about 15 minutes of that exercise where I focus on something, and it's something that sometimes I focus on a problem or something that I studied the night before, or that I'm studying, and I want to go more in depth. So there is a process where you calm your mind, you try to focus on the subject. And then you try to go in depth. That's part of the exercise. But it's again, normally the subjects are always related to loving kindness, to helping others, to try to be a better human being, which is something that is very hard to do, in this world, because then you go back, you start your day in business, and it's always a battle, a fight. So it's very important to remind yourself every day about those values, and it is worth to stick to those values and understand why. So that's, I would say, the most important part of my meditation.
No. So talking a little bit about changes and about the things we as people have gone through, because probably that's the world have gone through in the last couple of years. I'd like to get your take on how it's impacted workers. There's a tremendous amount of people walking away from their jobs. We had the Great Resignation. Yep. There's a tremendous amount of people coming back to work in jobs that are perhaps very different than the jobs they had before. What is your sense of what people are experiencing, how they're making the choices they're making now, and how might that inform a trend, if you have any sense of that?
I think, the pandemic has accelerated a change that has started before the pandemic. And the change was, at least here in the U.S., in Europe, things are always different, and it's different also now. But in the U.S. before the pandemic, many companies, including the companies I've been working with for a few years, had already started, more like an hybrid work kind of model, meaning we started to allow, home and work and office basically. What the pandemic has changed, where it really has unplugged all of us from that, office space.
Yeah.
Now we call that, we used to call that, and we still call it work place, meaning it was a place where we used to go every day.
Right.
It's the old idea and mentality of, I go to the office and I punch the clock, I work in that space for like 8-9 hours, and then I go back home with all the commute, etc. What the pandemic has changed, of course, the pandemic has unplugged pretty much all of us from the space, and we all had to get used to work remotely.
Yeah.
Which didn't mean that we were working less.
Yeah.
And that we are working less, because we're still doing that. But in fact, we ended up actually more connected virtually. And that has caused a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Because again, I think you and I have discussed, and I talked a little bit about the book, we are all social animals.
Yeah, and, there's a great quote from Aristotle you had in there, which is...
Yeah, it was something around the fact that, again, whoever human being... refuses to have a social life is either a god or he's insane. So basically, so it's...
meaning we need socialization.
Meaning we need socialization.
Social characters.
Yes, exactly. So, and that aspect of our life is very important, and I think that people realize that. But coming out of the pandemic, I think that what really changed is that, we're all going back to the office, of course, less. And we understand that we need to be back to a place where we can connect with people, clients, colleagues, because that connection is really vital. But at the same time, the model really changed from a workplace to a work space. No.
Yeah.
So, and with the concept of workspace, which is interesting, is that the workspace is not necessarily always the office.
Right.
It's the space where you connect, or where you are connected with your clients and colleagues on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Can be home office, can be corporate office, can be when you travel, wherever. And with that concept, of course, there is a transformation, ongoing transformation. I don't know, I've been asked a lot about this. I don't know exactly where we're going to end up, but for sure we're not going back to, the old way of, do business always in the same space, 8 hours a day, every single day. I don't think it's going to happen. I may be wrong, but I don't think it's, I think that companies also, the smart companies, are realizing that with a proper system in place and leadership in place and process and I would say rules and regulations, people know how to work and to perform. Actually, they perform better with this flexibility than in the old way. Like you say, we spent we're still spending so many hours working. Right. And, I don't know if, being in a space is really what determines, a good versus a bad performance. I don't think it's right. The old way of thinking that you can only perform if you have people in an office space because you can control them. I think that assumption is very wrong,
What I thought was fascinating was you mentioned your insight that while lots of data is showing C-suite executives and leadership that remote workers can be very productive. Mm-hmm. A lot of them still don't want to hear that concept. They don't want to hear that data. They say, I don't want to bother with that data. Tell me a little bit about what it's like having that kind of conversation with leaders.
Yeah. I think that, many leaders and many people, not just leaders, actually struggle with this change because they think that the only way to perform is by having people under control in a space. Yeah. And for me, the real problem is that they think that they can control things. In reality, in life, I think that the things that we can really control are almost none. There's nothing that we can control. Right. Around us, the environment is in constant transformation. Our body cells, and so in the business. And sometimes I challenge, leaders, and I said the only thing we can control is our mind, in the sense that we can really. That's the only thing that we can do. Why? Because again, if we can control the way we perceive things, then we can improve the way we act, and we can bring more value to our teams and the business. But for us to believe that the only way to perform is by having a bunch of people always in front of us in a physical environment, I think is really wrong. And as you said, it's the pandemic has proven that if you have a good interaction with your people, actually, unfortunately, people tend to work even more when working from home than when they're in the office, because we're always connected. Right. And that has caused also mental issues to many people. So it was even so extreme, this connectivity. But for sure, one thing that we've been able to prove is that people can perform and strongly also working from home or different spaces. So I think that, once again, I don't think that we should plug away from a physical space, from being together, but I think the answer is really what we continue to call hybrid work or flexible way of working. I don't know how we want to call it. I think that's a mix is going to be the future of work. And those leaders that actually, continue to push for people to go back to a physical environment 100% of the time, 24/7, and to always be connected, I think that, they're already facing a big challenge, because especially the young generation, they're quitting their jobs. Yeah. And I'm hearing a lot of people saying, they're quitting their jobs because they're rich, they don't need money. No, it's not true. I know many kids, smart kids, that actually, they're really creating this tension with company because they want to change. Right. They don't want to be a part of a culture of control freaks that, the only thing they care about is a short-term P&L strategy, and they don't really care about their people. Yeah. And I think that, this generation, it's going to contribute to create a better work-life balance. I think so.
Yeah, I think there's a fair amount of talk about that, which I'm sure you hear, and I hear in the legal field too, about a different generation of employees, of workers, of contributors that have a very different vision of what their suite of expectations is. And that suite of expectations may include remote work. It might include more vacation. It might include an opportunity to contribute to a charity that's something important to them. They're looking at their meaning and their jobs a little bit differently.
I think that a good example that I like to highlight and bring to the table, it's the parallel between, the young generation employees with the new and the young generation of consumers. Yeah. Because if you think about it, the young generation, it's looking to work for companies who serve a purpose. Like you say, they don't only look like short-term P&L goals, but they really create an environment where, they can learn. The company is committed to social initiatives, sustainability, and all those things. And the consumers, actually, the young consumers look to brands the same way. And it's very interesting to see how the young generation is shifting from buying from a brand to between different brands, basically based on the actions that these brands are taking to improve society and the environment. Sure. Recently, I read an article about Patagonia. Patagonia is really transforming the business. Just went from clothing to sustainable food and donating to specific projects that are aimed to improve the social life of a local community or the environment in general. And the young generation is actually, they care about that, and they started to buy more of that brand versus other brands that actually they don't care, or they haven't done really anything yet. And so the new generation of employees are actually thinking the same way about companies. They want to really know, even during interviews, I can tell you that they want to ask, do you have any question for me? Most times they ask me about, so do you have any charity initiatives? Do you have any educational programs that will allow me to learn more, take on an international experience, learn about and from other cultures? And based on that, they make the decision. Yeah. You can tell that they're excited. Now, then, it's important that whatever you tell them during an interview, you really make it happen when they join. Deliver, right? And you deliver, because I've been telling it to HR from many different companies. Guys, you have to stop thinking that your role is only like an administrative role. your role, it's these days, it's really more active and proactive in the sense that when you have this young talents or talents in general, you know, that just decide to join the company, you have to put together proper onboarding and follow them throughout their journey. Yep. And I compared that journey to almost like, you know, when you prepare a customer journey, when you invite a client, a customer to visit your company, you make sure that everything is perfect, you know, from manufacturing, you know, part of the tour to like, you know, the customer experience overall. And I think that we, you know, as successful brands and companies, we should be able to do the same thing for our employees. Think about it. Yeah. On a daily basis, it's nonstop. Of course, it's not. It requires a lot of energy and a lot, as I said, you know, a very active role of leadership and HR.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one of the challenges on the flip side of that, which is where the tension is that the duration of work is not as long, or at least it has not been in recent history as it used to be. My grandfather was in IBM after the Navy, and that's where he started, and that's where he ended, 42 years, right? Yeah. The average kid from my graduating class at Dartmouth has had, I think, one job every 2 years since graduation. So it's hard to find a company willing to invest so much in employees if the expectation is that they're going to be coming and going often. Right. I don't know, any thoughts on that concept?
And this is the biggest challenge, especially these days, because of technology. Yeah. Because like you say, you know, if you are unable as a company to, you know, keep your talents over 2 years, like you say, because 2 years is the time that you need really to educate people about your brand, your product, to train them. And so it's really a big investment. If they leave after, I mean to say, within the first 2 years, or even, you know, within the first 3 years, you know, in the short term, it's a big company failure, I think. Yeah. Which means that the reason why people leave companies, it's because, again, you know, it's because of the culture. It's because they don't deliver and they don't meet their expectation. And so, which normally when you talk to people, once again, you go back to the first interviews, when interview candidate, you tell them a story. Then they join. And the first thing that you hear, you know, walking around the company is, you know, oh, wow, you know, you should have told me when during the interview things are not really, I mean, as perfect as you pictured them. And so in technology, the big problem is that, you know, you need talents to really continue to evolve products, solutions, work on innovations. And so you need this young talents, and if you can't keep them, you know, beyond the 2 years, you've failed and you have serious problems because you can't innovate. Yeah. And in technology world, actually, kids live in a matter of 24 hours. Sure. If they're disappointed about something, they don't care about the salary like you and I used to do. Maybe as say, okay, I have the family here that I have to take care of, or like they say, you know what, this place is not good for me. I'm leaving, and I'll figure it out. Yes. And
there may be another job that I could apply for tomorrow and start on Wednesday.
And eventually make more money. And so it's, so the ability of attract talents and retain talents in the long term, I think it's a big challenge, and probably one of the most important vital mission of every company these days and in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Let me present the following scenario to you. You're interviewing a young candidate, comes to your office and says, Mr. Foli, I want to be like you. I want to have people come to me and ask for strategies on how to run their companies and how to create their businesses. I want to be like you. What's the recipe? What's my to-do list? How do I get there? What do you tell that person at 25 or 35 or 45?
The first answer will be, do you really want to be like me? But anyway, I'm joking. No, I think that one thing that by the way, I'm telling also my kids every day, it's really, you know, to approach life and work when they will get there with an open mind. Of course, it's easier to say passion and curiosity, that is something very important for all of us to always keep in mind. But really, it's, you know, I think the most important thing is to approach everything with an open mind. Because again, change is a constant, challenges are going to be a constant in life, everywhere, you know, life, work. And I think that the best way to approach it, everything, And from a career standpoint, certainly is to keep an open mind and also be humble. Think that again, you today you're walking away with a degree from college, and tomorrow, not that I'm not saying that degree is not going to be important, but you certainly you will have to continue to learn new things. Maybe drive things in different directions, and you can only do that if you are humble, if you have an open mind, if you have passion, and if you open it to it. Because if you don't do that, especially in this hyper-connected, fast-paced world, you're screwed. Really, it's like I see it also with me. I started with something, in the old corporate world, and today I'm doing something completely different. And also, I had to abandon the idea. I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be a CEO of a large corporation. If you ask me today, I like so much what I'm doing right now. Again, working on strategy, connecting with companies from different parts of the world, and learning about different industries and working with different industries. And do I know everything about all those industries? No, but I know the fundamentals, and I'm with an open-minded eye. I have learned how to approach these things. So it's, I think that this is the most important thing that or advice that I'm giving candidates. And as I said, start really with my kids also. Keep an open mind, be humble.
So I'm gonna end with some questions about the classic. You're on a deserted island. Yeah. And you only have a choice of a couple of things to bring with you. And I'm going to invite you in answers to these questions to take less than 10 seconds to respond. So it's got to be quick. Okay? So it's on that deserted island, and I know you're Italian born, so you probably have very refined tastes. What's the one food or drink you must have on that deserted island?
I'm not a big drinker, so I love coffee, so as an Italian, espresso, 2 shots twice a day.
Okay,
so,
all right.
I don't know if on a desert island I'll be able to get that.
This is a magical desert island.
That's
you
a magical.
Have whatever you want.
So then espresso,
And a book, the book you'd have to have at that point.
Beyond Religion from the Dalai Lama, because I think that in that book it's short and straight to the point when it comes to really talking about those values that we should all pursue in life in a practical way, which is not, his point is that it's even in Buddhism, all these values that we learn about helping others, about connecting with others, and really live something of value before we die. It goes over and beyond religion. So it's almost unified the concept of all of us being part of a big universe. And that is the book that I will bring with me.
Okay, and it's difficult, and we talked about this earlier, to say song or album, because there aren't necessarily as many albums that people play all the way through as there used to be. But if you had to choose that one album or song, I guess I'll let you choose between those two to listen to. It's going to be on repeat for a long time on that deserted island.
It's not an easy album to listen, so if you want to try, but it's Beaches Brew by Miles Davis, 1971. Okay. Yeah. And why? Because it was really the time where Miles, he's done his entire life, really explored a completely new way of playing music and create music, specifically jazz and fusion. This is what really started fusion at that time. So it's, that album for me, it's I've listened to it probably 1 million times, and every time it gives me a different perspective. So about creativity and approach, and
It's an interesting combination: espresso, Bitches Brew, and the Dalai Lama.
Yeah,
all
exactly.
On your deserted island. It sounds
perfect balance.
Yes, it sounds like a great place. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come in and talk and just to go over things. I think your presentation here gives the success in corporate life and just in life a little bit more accessibility to lots of people. Yeah. And I think that's really important as we all go out there and try to find what makes us tick and what we're going to find joy in. So thanks for coming, and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm glad that if I can, be helpful to other people, and
The podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Listeners are advised to consult with an appropriate professional before acting on any of the topics or matters discussed in the podcast. This podcast may be considered attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome.